S is meta defining. A will be good, B will be playable, C will be niche, and D is like you should probably disenchant. All right, this is the one I'm probably gonna get the most hate for, but here we go. Let's start off. Cagehead. Not only with Cagehead is there a really easy way to kill it with the location that was released in Return of Naxxramas, there's also multiple ways to either A, get the death rattle back or spread the death rattle, which I think is a very underrated aspect of this card. It's too unholy, which means you have to put it in probably some kind of unholy deck. I don't really know if you want to generate it necessarily. I think it's a really good card. It fits into the unholy deck more because you have a way to finish off the game if you lose the board, right? In my opinion, I'm gonna give Cagehead an A. I legitimately think the card is good. I think the card is very spooky and I'm worried for it. Also, it's important to note every single card in this is here for the next 2 years in standard, which means the possibilities with a card like this only get stronger with more cards introduced. Climatic Necrotic Explosion. This is one of the first cards. I think it's the very first card. It's the very first card, right? That is the rainbow for Death Knight. You have to have a blood, a frost, and an unholy rune in order to put this in your deck. It's very important to note that this card cannot be generated. So 10 mana, Lifesteal, deal 5 damage, summon 2 1/1 souls, randomly improved by courses you spent this game, which means either A, you get deal 5 goes to deal 6, or you can get summon 3, or you can get 2 1s or 1 2s or 2 2s, whatever. It's random. The problem with this card is that you have to play a very specific deck for this card actually to be playable. Now, is Rainbow Death Knight gonna be good? Maybe. If Rainbow Death Knight is good, I think it has potential to be a payoff for the deck. It is burn, it's a way to get board back, but here's the bigger problem. It is 10 mana. If Rainbow Death Knight is good, it's fine. But is it gonna be meta defining? I don't think so. I think this, for me at least, it's a pretty safe. Where the hell is it? I'm blind. Hold on, let me find it. Here. I think it's a C tier. I think it's gonna be niche. It has the possibility of going higher to B, but I think there are just better stuff for Death Knight that this card will not be a huge defining card whatsoever. Halviria Darkraven, 4 mana 4/3 rush. After a friendly rush minion attacks, give your minions +1 attack. So this card is being printed with a rush package for Demon Hunter. I just don't really see this being stronger than anything Demon Hunter has gotten recently. It is also a very boring card for Demon Hunter. I think you could have literally put this in almost any other class. Could have been a neutral legendary, right? Now, is it a bad card? No, there are definitely worse cards than this for sure. It can fit into a aggro board centric Demon Hunter, right? It's not a bad card. Again, I don't think it's going to be meta defining. I don't think there's a reason to play this over any other Demon Hunter card. I'm gonna give it a C. I actually do think it is better than the spell though, because I feel like this could actually provide more of a win condition than this can. And it doesn't have the deck building requirement. It's not horrible, but I feel like it's just really meh. 5 mana spell for Demon Hunter. Give your hero +2 attack and immune this turn, then attack each enemy minion. This card is very versatile, and versatility in Hearthstone is a very good thing. If you could use this to clear a board, you're very happy. If you could use this to basically become Reno Jackson with a lifesteal effect, which one is getting printed for the set, this could be fit into an aggro Demon Hunter deck. It could be fit into a combo deck, a control deck. It is very, very cool. The only bad part about this is that it does end up using your weapon charges, but it allows you to at least clear all of the minions, and then you could still attack face after, which I think is a very big deal. Versatility and just dealing damage is Demon Hunter's biggest advantage, and I feel like this is the type of card that will make the spell Demon Hunter deck even better. I think that this will be an A tier card. I have a feeling that this card will be very, very good. I'm very optimistic on it. It just seems like a very powerful effect. Zog Fog Snout. 7 mana 6/6 battlecry, summon 2 1/1 Quillboard with taunt, improved by your hero attack and armor gained this turn. I feel like this card is pretty boring. Being boring is not a bad thing. I feel like this is almost the equivalent to the hero card that Druid got for Knights of the Frozen Throne, which was Malfurion the Pestilent, which was regarded as a pretty boring card, but it ended up being very good because it was just easy to put into your deck. And I think if you're gonna put the hero card package with the spirit and the groovy cat, and you can just amplify your hero power to be very, very powerful, this is gonna be a very easy card to slot in. It is a lot of stats. I actually think it's gonna be pretty decent because I do think that package is gonna be great. So I'm actually gonna put it in B, as long as I can find it. I'm putting this guy in B. So this is the other card. Unfortunately, it's not on Blizzard's site, which is unfortunate. Rhythm and Roots. 4 mana, choose one secretly, summon 3 5/5 ancients in 2 turns. 1/1s or 8 giants in 4 turns. It's a nature spell, which is actually a pretty big deal because you could draw this actually considerably easy. But the problem is, when has 4 mana do nothing ever been playable? That's the real thing. If you draw this later into the game, it's not good because it's going to take too long for you to actually do anything. So you need to draw that's pretty early on. Yeah, it's 4 mana, but there's way better cards for you to be playing. The dude that gives you an extra mana crystal and draws you a nature spell for 4 mana, which I think is much better. I just feel like there are way better options for Druid than to do this. Also, the hero power package with the previous legendary is just way better in my opinion. I don't think this will see play unless you actually discover it from a card. I don't know how this will actually fit into a deck. Maybe if the metagame is slow enough, this will actually have time to see play. But I think overall there are just better ideas, and I'm going to put this in C tier. Now, I do think it's probably the worst in C tier. I don't think it's you need to disenchant it per se. I don't think it's disenchantable yet. Mr. Mukla. This is a 6 mana 10/10 rush battle cry. Fill your opponent's hand with bananas and is a beast. I think this card is very good. I think this is a very strong, powerful effect that can fit into virtually every hunter deck. There is very little downside to a card like this. You also get to mill your opponent's hand, or you get to mill your opponent's next draw. You have develop a 10/10. The worst case scenario for this card is that there's multiple minions on your opponent's board and then they buff them with bananas. But even if they buff them with bananas, they're paying 1 mana for +1/+1, and usually in 2023 Hearthstone, that is not really that good. When I look at this card, I'm like, damn, a 6 mana 10/10 that easily trades into everything and you can burn a card. That feels really, really good. It's hard to get punished with an effect like this, and I feel like this is going to be one of the strongest hunter cards they've gotten in a very long time. I would give it an S, but I think it's just an A. I think it's like here, somewhere around there. I don't think it's an S. I'm very, very optimistic on it. Strangled Thornheart, 10 mana tradable spell for hunter. Resurrect all friendly beasts that cost 5 or more. If it wasn't for the tradable tag on this card, I think this would be a disenchantable card because it is so awkward to play. It's going to sit in your hand for the entire game. Because it has tradable, it makes this card so much better. And as long as there are playable beasts that cost 5 or more, there is potential for an effect like this. This card will be here for 2 years. At some point during those 2 years, because Blizzard really, really likes beasts, there will probably be something that makes this card playable. There's the combo potential, but I feel like it's very unlikely. There are ways to reduce the mana cost of this, but because you have to make sure beasts die first before you can even cast the spell, it makes it just an extremely slow card. I'm going to give this a C. I think it's better than the Druid spell. I do think it's probably better than the Demon Hunter spell. I hope it's good though. The effect on it is incredible. I don't know if you guys have seen the animation for this card, but beautiful. Infantize the Maxitude, 2 mana legendary spell for mage. Discover a spell. Finale, return this to your hand at the end of your turn. If you don't know what finale is if it spends the rest of your mana crystals, which means if this is the last card you play and it spends the rest of your mana crystals, you can discover a spell on your next turn. Would you pay 2 mana to discover a spell in mage? I think some of us, actually most of us will probably pay 2 mana to discover a spell. But the fact is that you generally want to do this last is kind of awkward because you would like to discover first and then rationalize your decisions to say like, oh, I want to do this now. If this is a slower metagame, I think this card has so much potential. If it's slower, you don't mind discovering last because you can still set up your next turn. But if you compare this to other cards that were also 2 mana that discovered a spell, there are just better ones. Ruined Orb is rotating, but that's just a better version of this card in my opinion. It doesn't affect the board either. Like it just feels kind of rough. I'm not optimistic on this card. I'm gonna put like C again. I feel like there's a lot of C legendaries in here. I feel like it's better than the Hunter legendary at the moment, so it's probably around here. DJ Mana Storm, 10 mana 8/8 battlecry. Set the cost of spells in your hand to 0. After you cost 1, the others cost 1 more. The problem with this card currently is the spells in the standard format. There are not a ton of spells that really synergize with this effect because it's basically Caligos, but you need to have the spells in your hand. The benefit of Caligos is that you discovered a spell, that spell costs 0 mana, and the effect would, carry on to the next turn, where this one's like, it depends on the spells in your hand, and you need to have spells that are absolutely worth playing with a 10 mana 8/8 because that's a very bad stat line for 10 mana. It doesn't impact the board other than the spell. I'm not super optimistic on this card now, but just like the Hunter legendary, the spell, as more big spells get introduced into the format, this card might get better because there's a better payoff. There's also a draw card for mage that draws 3 spells, but you could do the turn before then play this. At the moment, I don't see this card being being that impactful, which is very sad because it's pretty awesome. Basically, the way to describe this is currently I would give it like here, but I think as bigger spells come in the game, it's going to go up and then maybe up even further. But again, it's all about Mage getting to the point where they can pay 10 mana and be happy with the payoff of it. So I'm going to put it like here, somewhere around here, right? It's pretty close to the Hunter spell. Starlight Groove, 3 mana Paladin spell. Give your hero Divine Shield for the rest of the game. Playing a holy spell refreshes it. I think this card's very strong. I think getting a Divine Shield on your hero is going to be a very annoying effect to deal with. It's going to feel really good when you play it, but this is a type of effect that if you're playing any mid-range to slower Paladin deck, you're putting this in your deck 100% of the time. Getting through a Divine Shield is very frustrating on a minion sometimes. If you don't have a ping and you have one big minion, this card is so frustrating to deal with. Paladin has the tools to constantly refresh the Divine Shield over and over again. I feel like this will be one of the best legendaries of the set. I feel like this has a ton of potential and it's here for the next 2 years. If you like Paladin, I feel like you're going to be a big fan of it. I'm going to give it an A. I think it's like here. I think it's very good. Aggro with the 1/1 will just proc it. Yeah. And if you play a big minion that dies to Shadow or Death, Kangor Dancing King, 5 mana 3/3, Lifesteal, Death Rattle, swap this with a minion from your hand and give it Lifesteal. I think this card is insane. When I first saw this card, I wasn't very optimistic on it, but the fact is that whatever minion you swap out, you give Lifesteal, I think is ginormous. I think that is such a powerful thing to do. There is a way to tutor this card out with one of the minions that Paladin's also getting. Card that keeps on giving. It's an absolute, like, you need to silence the effect pretty quickly. Otherwise, they're just going to keep cheating out cards. And if Hearthstone has taught me anything over the years, is that mana cheating is absolutely stupid, and it can be ridiculous because you're adding Lifesteal to that minion. I think this card will be extremely powerful in almost every metagame it's in, and I am pretty optimistic on this effect. And I'm gonna give this, where is this? I'm gonna give this also an A. I'm gonna put it right next to the other Paladin spells. Again, if you guys disagree with me, I don't care. This is my tier list. Go make your own. Thank you so much. And this is half the fun, by the way. Like, we can look at this in hindsight and see how accurate I actually was. Love Everlasting, 3 mana priest spell. Your first spell each turn costs 2 less, lasts until you don't play a spell on your turn, and it's a holy spell. It is 3 mana do nothing, but because this is mana cheating every single turn, you basically don't even care that you're spending 3 mana do nothing, because you're just gonna get that mana back like over 2 turns. It's like having a preparation that you don't actually have to draw, and because you don't have to draw it and it's there every single turn, as long as you have a spell, it's a consistent effect, kind of like with quest lines. Like, once this effect is played and you can keep using it, god, it's gonna be very frustrating. There's so many ways to use this. It makes cards that cost more better. So if you play this on turn 3 and you need that Whirlpool, which cost 8 and now costs 6, which is fantastic. Priest just absolutely loves this effect. Almost every single Priest deck wants this, except for maybe the Shadow Aggro Priest. There's that other card that was released in March of the Lich King called, what is it called, chat? Savannah? I'll put it up on the screen that lets you discover a spell every single turn. I can't imagine this card not seeing play in Priest. The real question is Priest going to be playable? I think Priest will be playable, so I'm gonna give it an S. I actually think this card is bonkers, and it's there for the next 2 years. I'm feeling like it's gonna absolutely be the turbo nuts, and I'm pretty excited to play against it and with it. I can't wait. I feel like it's gonna be absolutely ridiculous. Heartbreaker Adonis, 4 mana 4/8 Battlecry, deal 4 damage to this minion. Overheal, deal 5 damage to a random enemy. Overheal is a new mechanic that they're introducing to Priest this year, which is if a minion gets healed over its maximum health, it will proc the effect. The turn you play it is a 4 mana 4/4, which is not great. That means you need to heal this for 5 in order to get the overheal, which may take a long time. There are other cards in the set that do help this, and Priest is obviously good at healing, so there will be a time where healing this will be pretty easy. Maybe it's for like a combo. I think the real win condition for this card though is if you get it with reviving it. I don't know if Priest currently has that effect. I think they don't have a way to fully revive it, right? I think this card is at the moment pretty garbage. I'm just gonna be real. I don't think it's very good. I think the bigger problem with it is just it's so much of a setup and so many resources for you to actually get the overheal effect, and you don't ever want to play a 4 mana 4/4. So unless Priest just gets a way to resurrect it, I'm just not optimistic on it. I think it's just extremely slow. You probably just have better win conditions, and like comparatively, look at this card compared to this card, right? So I'm not too excited about that card. I would probably give it a C though. I don't think it's disenchantable. I think like it's tough because I think currently it might actually be a D, but I think it's the lowest on C. Like I think I'd rather play the Druid spell than that. Play with Brand and Wild, yeah. Bounce Around featuring Garona. This is the 3 mana legendary spell for Rogue. Return all friendly minions to your hand. This cost 1 this turn. So it's important to note that Shadow Step is still in the core set for this card. This is a very powerful effect. If you have any minion on the board, you can go attack, bounce it back to your hand and play it. You could preparation before you play this card, which I think is going to be the real use case for this. And if you've been playing Hearthstone recently, you know the card Astalar, which can be very, very good with this effect. I have a feeling that this is going to be one of the most hated cards of this entire year. It seems very good, and with the help of Shadow Step, this card only gets better. I'm very, very surprised they printed an effect like this. Now, maybe I'm being too pessimistic about how powerful this will be because we know how good Shadow Step is, but it still has the potential to be absolutely broken because of this line right here. We know that mana cheating is very, very good. I am feeling pretty good on this, especially because Rogue just has a lot of tools to use this. I'm gonna put an A. It's somewhere around here. Like, this is another card that with more minions coming into play with stronger battle cries or whatever stronger effects, this card is honestly really, really good. I think it's going to be meta defining. I think it's just going to be a very good card. MC Blink Tron, 5-minute 3/4 battle cry. Both players equip 1/2 microphones. Your opponent increases all damage they take by 1. And it's a mech. This is a pretty interesting effect. Taking 1 damage extra for each damage that is done to your hero is very good. It basically means you're gonna die twice as fast. Very scary when you're giving it to a class like Rogue that has a lot of ways of dealing damage. And like I said earlier with Astalar, this is a very good card to play it with. It's a great finisher. It's a good in the top end of an aggro deck. It replaces weapons, which is one of the most important aspects of this entire set. Every single class is getting their own weapon. So if you could replace it and give them a bad weapon, you're pretty stoked. I can't imagine this card not seeing play at some point. I don't think it's as powerful as the spell. I think it's going to be B. I don't think it's going to be an A. I think it's going to be B. Where the hell is this card? I think it's better than Mr. Zog though. Looks interesting, especially the fact that your opponent can't get rid of it. I mean, they could just play another weapon. It also just gives you an extra damage. It gives you 2 damage with the microphone just to smack him to your opponent's face, right? So again, I don't know if I'm pronouncing the name of this ox thing correctly, but Inza. I think that's also Inza. Okay, whatever. 5-mana 5/5 battle cry. For the rest of your game, your overload cards cost 1 less. The problem with cards like this is if you don't draw it early enough, it's generally not great because you have to find the card and then play it. And then at that point, is spending 5 mana better than just playing the cards for themselves? It's very tough to tell. Now, if you end up getting this early on in your game, and I'm talking turn 5, you're pretty stoked because it sets you up for a much better win condition. But we've seen countless cards like this, right? Really depends on how early you can draw this. If the overload package really needs this mana cheat, it might be playable, and it might honestly just be worth putting it into the overload package if that card is playable. To be fair, it's not just cards in your deck. It also counts for cards that you discover, which is probably pretty good. I think that's one of the things I was actually not judging it on, is that discover cards also get reduced, which could be really good. I don't know. I'm not like, again, I feel like the effects like this are so bad because if you draw this later in the game, it just feels awful. I'm not optimistic on it. I really am not. I've been hurt by like a card like this too many times where I'm like, oh, that's gonna be so good when I draw it, but then every single time it's like, whatever. I'm gonna give it a C. I don't think it's like insane. I'm hoping I'm wrong because the effect looks so good. I'm gonna put it like high up on C though. I think it's like probably the best version of C. Also, overload cards will probably be printed throughout the rest of the 2 years that this card is in standard, which means this card gets better. Jive Insect, 5-mana shaman spell, transform a minion into Ragnaros the Fire Lord, and it has overload 2 and it is fire. I think this card's awesome. All right, I think this card is really well designed. I think it's really cool. It's very powerful. For those of you who don't know Ragnaros, I don't know why it's not here, but it's an 8-mana 8/8 that can attack, but it does 8 damage randomly to an enemy. This card's good. If you have any minion on the board, you're pretty happy with just hitting face and turning into Ragnaros. If you need that ability to just transform an enemy minion into Ragnaros and kill it after, that's great. I just think this card is so cool. And basically I'm going to ask myself, would I pay 5 mana to have Ragnaros on turn 5? And I think most of the time you're pretty happy with that. And worst case, right? Worst case, you just totem on turn 7 with this. And I think you're pretty stoked about this. Someone said Devolve enters the chat. Even if it gets devolved, you're still getting a 7 drop. It'll be interesting to see how powerful Reg ends up being at 5 mana in 2023 Hearthstone. I am a Rag enthusiast, which means I'm going to put this in A. Somewhere around here. I'm pretty optimistic on the card. I actually think there are a lot of good legendaries in this set, which is really nice to see. The overload's a pain. I mean, you have Rag though. Like, you already got your tempo. Like, your opponent's gonna have to deal with that Ragnaros. All right, here we go, boys. This is where the real show begins. 5-minute 3/6 Rin, Orchestrator of Doom. Taunt, Death Rattle. Both players draw 2 cards, discard 2 cards, and destroy the top 2 cards of their deck. Chat, I think this is the hardest card to give an analysis on. We've never really had a card like this in Hearthstone. It is very hard to predict how great of a card this will be. The real use case of this is that you put this in against a combo or a slower deck, even maybe potentially aggro, but generally you're going to want to do it against a slower or combo deck, and they're going to draw 2 cards, they're going to discard 2 cards, they're also going to destroy 2 more cards at the top of their deck. It's a disruption tool, and disruption tools are a more of a tech card than they are just put it in your deck. If you need this type of effect, Rarran will be one of the best disruption cards Hearthstone has ever seen. But if you don't need any form of disruption, I can't imagine this card will see play. Unfortunately for Rarran, the effect is just too linear. It's not very versatile. Most of the time, if you're going against some kind of aggro deck, this is not going to do shit, and it might actually end up hurting you more. So I unfortunately feel like for me, unless the metagame really calls for it, Rarran is just the C card, and it's probably around here if I'm gonna be honest. It's unfortunate because I do think that Rarran is really cool, but I just think it's gonna be too slow. I hope I'm wrong because I want this card to see play. I will be crafting it in gold, but Warlock is saved with a fantastic legendary called Symphony of Sins, which is 6 mana legendary spell. Discover and play a movement, shuffle the other 6 into your deck. Chat, I actually don't know how this works. Do you get to see all of the movements, or do you only get to see 3 of them? So you get to discover for 3 of them. Let's go through them each first. You have Movement of Envy, which is remove the top 6 cards of your opponent's deck. You have Movement of Pride, which is draw your highest cost minion, reduce its cost by 6. You have Movement of Wrath, deal 6 damage to all characters. You have Movement of Desire, Lifesteal, deal 6 damage to the enemy hero. You have Movement of Gluttony, give a random minion in your hand, deck, and battlefield +6/+6. Movement of Greed, draw 6 cards. Movement of Sloth, summon a 6/6 demon with Taunt and Reborn. And that is what the minion looks like. I think this card's phenomenal. I think this is the type of card that Warlock has been waiting for a very long time. Almost all of the movements in this spell will see play at some point during a game because they don't feel bad to play whatsoever. They're all fine. And it's very contextual based on the matchup you're going against. This is a very versatile card, and versatility is very good because that means in a vacuum, this card will actually be one of the best cards in your deck. Chat, I may be very biased. Some of you know that I am a huge Warlock player. I'm gonna give it an A. It's somewhere around here for me, but I can see people being like, oh, this is too slow. I think it's a very powerful effect, and if you're gonna play Rarran, it kind of makes more sense. You just have to make sure you play this card first. We move on to the worst class, Warrior. God, all right, can I get an F in chat for Warrior? Or a 4/3 battlecry, copy a minion of each type in your hand. Listen, they printed a similar card in Rostakon's Rumble, and it barely saw play. It barely saw it, which means this card in 2023 is probably not going to see play. I would recommend, if you end up getting this card, to disenchant it. I don't know why it's not 3 mana. I don't know why it doesn't have rush. I don't know why it doesn't have taunt or something. This card needs to be better in order for you to actually want to play the package that it's being put in for Warrior. It's rough, bro. Unfortunately for Warrior, this is going to be my first D. Black Rock and Roll, 5 mana warrior spell. Give all minions in your deck attack and health equal to their cost, and it's a fire spell. So this is the same problem as the Shaman Legendary earlier, where you need to draw this pretty early on. Otherwise, that spell becomes absolutely useless, right? If you don't draw this on turn 5 or potentially even earlier, good luck, because the win condition that you made for your deck is absolutely garbage. And even if you end up getting the card, is the payoff gonna be worth it? You also need to draw minions afterwards. If you don't draw a minion afterward, it's gonna be miserable. I don't think you necessarily have to disenchant this card. It's not like the worst card I've ever seen in my life. I think the other legendary is much worse. I just don't see how Warrior can play this, and that's my bigger problem with this. If you can discount it consistently or draw it consistently on turn 5, I think you could definitely do it. It's the worst card in C for me, or you're just disenchanting it. So I'm gonna put it there. All right, this is where it's gonna get a little spicy, chat. Photographer Fizzle, 3 mana 3/3 battlecry. Take a snapshot of your current hand and shuffle it into your deck. Now, the best part about this card is that it doesn't just take your hand and just put all the cards in your deck. It actually takes a snapshot of it, and it's a singular card, which is a very big deal because that means your deck isn't bloated with more cards. Well, it is. You do put another card into your deck. You're gonna put good cards into your deck, and good cards in your deck means that you would probably want them into your deck. That sounds like a pretty good situation to be in. This card is definitely not going to be for every metagame. game, it's not gonna be needed probably at least 50% of the time. Maybe you just want extra value in your mid range, or maybe you want to try to get another copy of a legendary that you could just draw later on. I think the best case for this card is just gonna put it into a slower value oriented deck if you need extra cards. In the next 2 years, I could probably guarantee this card will see play at some point. And how optimistic I actually am, I think it's around, I would say like a B or a C. I think it's gonna be a B. I think it's pretty good. I think it's like 3-mana 3/3 to get your whole hand back into your deck for 1 card. That seems awesome. That's a lot of value. Like, you could almost look at it as like, would you pay 2 mana to discover a card from your hand? Yeah, you probably would. So I think that's pretty good. So we've actually seen this card in the game. ETC Band Manager, 4 mana 4/4. While building your deck, assemble a band of 3 cards. Battlecry, discover 1. I think this card is pretty great. It is basically like a sideboard in Hearthstone where you can decide to put 3 cards that may not be needed in every single matchup. And let's just say, for instance, you're going against a slower matchup, you could put Rin in your ETC. It's basically like, here's a card that you can put all your tech cards in so you don't draw them consistently. And if you need it for that matchup, you're pretty stoked. ETC is a really good legendary. I don't think it's meta defining, but I think A tier is pretty great. All right, this is the one I'm probably gonna get the most hate for, but here we go. Posek Audio Engineer, or is it Posek? Posek, I'm gonna go with Posek, whatever. Audio Engineer, 4 mana 5/4 Battlecry, add 2 3/3 bots to your opponent's hand, death battle, shuffle them for yourself. I think this is an S tier card. I think this will be meta defining. I think this card is absolutely ridiculous. I can't believe they printed this card. Worst case scenario is a 4 mana 5/4 and you give your opponent 2 3/3 boom bots. It's not even bad. This card will be played in literally every single aggro deck ever until it's rotated out. There's no way that adding 2 3/3 bots to your opponent's hand is even relevant. The bots don't do anything. They're just 3/3 max. Chat, if you legitimately think that your opponent is gonna play these cards, you're out of your mind. No one is playing a 3 mana 3/3 back from their hand. No one, absolutely no one. Which means this card is so many stats for absolutely nothing. It's 4 mana 5/4 for an insane amount of stats, and I'm putting an S tier. I think it's insane. I actually think it's insane. I can't believe how good that card is. You put it on the high end for an aggro deck. I think it's gonna be one of the best aggro cards they've ever printed. I'm very optimistic on this card. How much mana would be the bots? They're 3 mana 3/3s. Chat, ask yourself this question, all of you in chat who are doubting me. How many times in the past year have you played a 3 mana 3/3 do nothing? I guarantee you the answer is no, you haven't, which means why would your opponent want to do that? It is so ridiculous. And you're getting a 5/4. And if your opponent reacts to the 5/4, you get more stats. This card's insane. I don't understand why they made this card. I think it's broken. I'm pretty optimistic about this card. I think it's S tier. I think it's going to be arguably one of the best cards they've ever printed. I think people are going to end up despising it. You're playing against Aggro Shadow Priest right now, okay? Aggro Shadow Priest, which is a deck that's super fast paced. You play this on turn 4 while you already have other minions on the board. What does your opponent want to do? They want to kill your board, which means they're not going to play the 3 mana 3/3s. They're going to try to kill your board, which means you get 3/3s afterwards. It's actually insane. Tony, King of Piracy, 5 mana 4/6. Both players' decks are swapped. Finale, draw a card. And it's a pirate. This is a very hard card to evaluate because we've never really had an effect like this other than King Togwaggle. And with King Togwaggle, it's tough because it was really only played at Druid because Druid had the ability to get more mana. Now this card, you could swap your opponent's deck and you could draw from your opponent's deck. You could just put this on like a high end of an aggro deck, right? Stop your opponent from drawing control cards and then you just kind of, you know, let them suffer until they can actually kill this card. It works with the Jailer, which I think is the most interesting. So if you burn your deck and then you play Tony, the Tony's now immune, which means unless your opponent can actually answer this, they're gonna die to fatigue. Even with all of that though, I think this card is mainly gonna be a very niche effect. I don't think it's gonna be like very meta defining. I don't think you're going to see this in a ton of decks. This is a very specific win condition or a very specific disruption card. And just like Rin, unless the meta really calls for it or there's a combo that you can do that's really broken, it's going to be like a C tier card. Okay, this is the last legendary. The 1 Amalgam Band, 7 mana 6/6 Battlecry, gain a random bonus effect for each minion type you played this game. Before you even ask, if you play an Amalgam that has all minion types, it only procs this thing once. Has always been the case. Now, what is a random bonus effect? It's like Wind Fury, Rush, Divine Shield, which means if you play a bunch of them, you could get a 7 mana 6/6 with Stealth, Divine Shield, and Wind Fury, which is pretty spicy. This is a very easy card to evaluate because we've seen a card similar to this called Siamat, which was in Sabers of Uldum. The difference is that Siamat didn't have this effect. You just picked 2 keywords and you were stoked. Where this, like, you actually have to play minions beforehand. Now, if you can play minions beforehand, you're probably okay with this. You probably put this in some kind of mid-range or aggro deck, maybe even potentially a control deck, but you need to have time in order for you to actually play some minions. How many minions do you actually have to play for this to be worth it? Maybe like 4. So by turn 7, could you get this to actually be pretty decent? Yeah, you probably could. Most importantly about this effect, chat, is that it's an all as well, which means every single buff to mechs or undead, whatever, actually works with this card, which makes it a little bit better than you guys probably think it is. I don't think it's broken by means. I think it's like a B tier. Can it get charged? I believe it can't get charged. I feel like they didn't want to add that. Anyways, this is my tier list. I'm very confident in this. This is 100% accurate. I think all of you would probably agree with me. Thank you for watching.